Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Tyddyn Bryn podcast. My name is Ellie and you can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Tyddyn Bryn. Today is Wednesday the 25th of January and thank you for taking the time for giving me a go. I was a bit nervous about starting podcasting, but after a bit of pestering by Jenny of Owl About Yarn and Zoe of Pins and Needles, I've decided to give it a go. As you can probably hear in the background, I have a 9-month-old son, William. I'll try and insert a picture here. Who refuses to sleep. So I'm looking to get 15 minutes in spare a day. So you may hear a few noises from time to time in the background, rattles, shouts, etc. that you can hear right now. Because true to form, he slept long enough for me to collect all the things together today and long enough to have a wee. The other noise you might hear in the background is my neurotic spaniel Suki, who likes to growl, woof, bark, generally make a load of noise at any sort of noise she hears outside, which is rather a lot. I'll try and insert a picture of her here as well. I've decided to split the podcast up into some small sections, mainly because I'll only be able to film it in short bursts with baby William and various other bits and pieces that I've got going on. So I hope this works okay. Right, Tyddyn Bryn deserves a bit of an explanation. It's a 25-acre small holding that my husband and I acquired 3 years ago. We acquired a shell of a barn which had been partly renovated but not at all finished. It had no windows, it had no doors. I'll try and insert a picture here. We had a tin hut which we camped out in for 2 years whilst doing it up, which the previous owner lived in for 10 years, and I'll try and do a bit of a video log of that at some point so you can have a little look round. It's quite an experience. We're now getting to work. We've finished the house, near enough now. It's completely livable in, and we're now starting to work on the land. We've got about 13 acres of good pasture, 9 acres of woodland, some rough pasture, some grassland. We've put in a 48 tree orchard, all sorts of other things as well. We're looking at getting some fencing put in. I'll do a couple of video logs about the farm and post them up on YouTube as well if people are interested. Right, on to the first section, knitting. I'm a bit of a serial starter of projects, but more about that one later. What I'm currently working on at the moment are some socks. And actually I've got a half-finished object. These socks are knitted in a crazy Zauber ball. You can see the colours there. Lovely colour changes. They're for my husband. I got the yarn in Loop in London on the 2017 Great London Yarn Crawl, and these were supposed to be his Christmas socks. Unfortunately, with William and all the other bits and pieces of knitting for everybody else for Christmas, his socks have languished to the bottom of the pile. But I have turned the heel on the last of the pair. I've been doing a bit of a reinforced heel for him. So I've been doing, I think it's called a partridge heel, knit one, slip one, which makes the fabric of the sock a bit thicker on the back there and also gives it a bit of texture. My husband is quite hard wearing on socks. He goes through the heels and the toes and the ball of the foot quite happily. So we found that the Crazy Zauber ball is actually quite a hard wearing yarn, and he doesn't go through it as fast as some of the other ones. The next thing I'm working on is a brioche mat. Now, if you watch the Pins and Needles and the Owl About Yarn podcasts, you'll see that they've both finished their mats. I'm, again, languishing behind, mainly due to lack of brain cells with lack of sleep from William. But I've made it past row 5. Up until row 5, I think I frogged it probably 6 or 7 times, just trying to get my head round the brioche knitting. But we seem to be there. There's definitely a pattern forming on that side. Not quite as clear on the reverse side. I've knit mine up in some scraps of actual sort of a lightweight double knit. I know both the other girls did theirs in fingering weight yarn, so mine is probably going to be fairly enormous, considering it's supposed to be a mug mat. It's the Deco mug mat, and I can't for the life of me remember who the pattern's by. The red yarn is a Rowan tweed. The black is a random acrylic that I had in the stash, but I thought it made a nice contrast. So I'm trying to do a little bit of that now every evening. So hopefully by the next time I podcast, they will be a little bit more, or even a finished object to show you. The next thing I'm working on is another hat for my son, William. I have knitted him up a hat. I just need to knit the ears now to go onto it. I'm going to knit some little bear ears to put onto it, and then I will write up and probably publish the pattern if I get time. I've knit it quite a bit bigger than he probably currently needs it, but that's mainly because he's grown out of a hat in less than a month, for probably the last 3 months. This is in a Cedar 4-ply, held double. I thought the colour matched his eyes. And yeah, these are the 2 hats that he's currently grown out of. So this is his last one that he grew out of. It became basically too short, so you can see the added length on the new hat is quite significant. The only problem with it being slightly bigger is that he can now pull it off his head. And then the one before, which was a stretchy little number, so that did last him a little while. Bits of fluff on there. It did last him a little while, but again, still now far too small for his great big bonce that he's acquired. So that's all for knitting. The next part of the podcast is something I'm going to be calling the Whip Walk of Shame. Inspired by the Pins and Needles podcast, I went through my entire stash the other week and looked at different yarns for different projects that I'm going to be doing throughout this year, and also discovered all of my whips. There are 17. As I said earlier, I do have a bit of a problem with casting on, but there are 17 whips in the stash just over to my left. Right, so we've got William's leggings. This is a vintage utility leggings by Sublime Yarns, and they are going to be far too small for him. So they're probably going to be one of the last things I finish knitting up. So they'll either be for somebody else's baby or for any other babies that appear here. I have the Owl blanket, this Owl Obsession blanket by Marken of the Hat and I. Most of the pieces are crocheted up. I just need to crochet them together and put eyes and beaks on the owls. I have a modified Lady Buller. It's in Noro and Cedar Click DK. I've made a Lady Buller before, but that one currently needs repairing. But I decided to make another one, and I've decided to sort of hack it slightly, if you like, and put some colour work around the bottom. I probably would have finished it if it remained simple, but again, it's another knit for me, so it got pushed to the back of the queue whilst I was doing other bits and pieces. I've got 2 sock yarn blankets on the go, yes, 2. One is my yarn, and 2 is every single sock yarn that I've ever acquired and knit. The next thing then is William's Daydreamer, which is in this lovely little project bag, which was made for me by Zoe of the Pins and Needles podcast. Thank you, Zoe. Little elephants, my favourite things. I have currently knit one sleeve and have started the other sleeve for this. This is a Daydreamer by Jennifer Steengas. It's a paid-for pattern on Rav. It's knit in fingering weight yarn. This top yarn here, this beige yarn, is a yarn that was in my grandmother's stash, which I received when she passed away. And this bottom bit here is one of my yarns, a rainbow yarn. So this probably has to be the next whip that I actually tackle, because otherwise William will be too small for that one too. I have some toe-up knee socks. They're non-matching. They're using all the Tuth and Bryn sock yarns. Going to be completely non-matching, and again, I'm probably halfway up the foot on each of those. I'm doing them 2 at a time. I have some Regia hand dye effect yarn knee socks, which I'm designing my own pattern for. It's a sort of a swirling pattern that goes down the leg. It's a top-down pattern, and I'm probably halfway down one calf on the first sock. Then I've got my grey jumper. Again, it's another one of my own patterns. I need to sew the neckline and the ends in on that. I'm probably not going to publish that pattern though, because it's been so long since I actually knit it. I can't remember for the life of me what half of my notes about the pattern actually mean. That one's quite close to being finished, actually, that jumper. I've got a Tunisian crochet blanket, which is being made out of Rowan Big Wall and some random double knit to sort of stripe it in between. I have a temperature scarf, which has summer and autumn been done, and I need to winter and spring to finish it off. I have an owl puff who has no face, a baby owl hat which needs some pom-poms and some and a face. I have an animal crackers hat which is exceedingly small. I think I probably should have swatched up the yarn, but I probably, if I fleece lined it, it'll probably do William actually when he's about 3 or 4. I've got a seaweed style scarf, one of those tape yarns that you knit through. That's about halfway done. I've got a bag full of leaf babies, which I've been making up for forest schools. Little wooden pegs and little leaves then that the babies then sit inside. Some of the little babies are getting little acorn hats. All sorts of bits and pieces, but that's for my forest schools. In my day job, I'm actually a special needs teacher, and I've also qualified recently as a forest schools tutor, level 3 forest schools tutor. So that's been rather exciting. And the last project on the list then is the Waves of Leaves shawl. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of the lady that has written that pattern, but needless to say, that has been languishing a very long time. It's a lace weight pattern. I'm knitting it up in a very nice bright blue lace weight yarn, and yeah, I think that takes quite a lot of brain power, so that's probably going to be one of the knits that I leave towards the end of the year when my son is maybe a little bigger and maybe actually sleeps some more. So that is the Whip Walk of Shame. The plan there is to try and do 1 to 2 projects out of that a month and finish them off and get them off that list. So I've said it here now on the internet, so it's got to happen. As I said though, the first one I'm probably going to tackle is William's Daydreamer. I have just finished my Martin Story blue cardigan. I'll try and insert a picture here. Which has been languishing probably for about 4 years. I knit it up and it was enormous. So what I've done is I've taken off the button band and the buttons, which made it a much better size. The button band was probably, 3 to 4 inches wide actually on it. So I've taken that off, I've sewn a zip in, and then I've over sewn the edges of the hood just to finish it off, and actually it's actually now wearable. Right. On to the next section. Right, the next section of the podcast is sewing. I am a fairly new sewist. I did quite a bit of sewing before in school and when I was quite a bit younger, but I lapsed as a sewist for quite a number of years. So recent finishes, I've got 2 finished objects to show off. The first finished object is the bedroom curtains that I have currently made for the farm that we are renovating. I shall insert a picture here for that one. And then the second object, a finished object, is these. These are the Barcelona trousers by iKatie Designs. I bought this fabric in Ray Stitch in London on the Great London Yarn Crawl last September, both the cuff and the jersey, and I love it. I absolutely love this fabric. There's little pockets, and they're hopefully going to be long enough now to last him a little while, the rate he seems to be growing at. I've got enough of this fabric left over though. I'm going to make William a little t-shirt, and I've also acquired along the way the Agnes pattern by Tilly and the Buttons, and I've got some black jersey, so I'm going to the main body of the Agnes in black, and then I'm going to have brightly coloured sleeves for me. So those are my 2 finished objects on the sewing. I've got lots more sewing planned, as you'll see from the acquisitions and section of the podcast. And I also need to sew an entire farmhouse's worth of curtains, so there'll be quite a lot of curtains going up in this finished objects section. Right, on to acquisitions. Recent acquisitions here then, both from Christmas and from a few purchases that I've made. I popped into Hobbycraft the other day to pick up some bits and pieces, well, mainly some Dylon I needed to make a throw for the bed at the farm, and I found this pattern. This is the Simplicity 1080A. It's either a tunic or a long top, tunic dress or a long top with pockets on the front, and it can be made up in calico, linen type fabrics. And I've got lots of fabric left over from making all my wedding decorations, and I really, really like the fabric, so I'm going to make one of those, either the short or the long dress, depending on how much fabric I've actually got, sort of patchworked out for myself. The next acquisition then was one of my Christmas presents. My younger sister bought me the Merchant and Mills workbook. I can't wait to dive into some of these patterns. There's an awful lot in here that I would really, really like to do. Really like to do. They're very simple patterns for a very simple, almost capsule wardrobe. It says a collection of versatile sewing patterns for an elegant all-season wardrobe. So it'll take me well through all the bits and pieces that I want to have a go at making. I think I'm probably going to make the trousers first out of this though. The next acquisition is from Jenny of All About Yarn, and it's the Lotte Jansdotter Everyday Style book. Again, so many patterns in here that I want to make, so many. I particularly like this tunic in there, so I think that'll probably be one of the first ones I have a go at. That, and I'm gonna have to flick through if I to find the pattern, because I haven't marked out the pages. Sorry, I had to disappear then to deal with my son who'd started crying. The next acquisition then is a yarn I picked up actually yesterday in a yarn shop that seems to have opened up next to the post office in Newport. It's a Kefia Olay Socks Storm. It's a superwash wool, 75% wool, 25% nylon, and it's 150 grams. I bought this to do some socks for either my husband or my father, probably my husband, as he's seen it and is eyeing it up already. But with 150 grams, there's probably going to be enough to do a couple of pairs of socks for William as well. So that's that one. The other acquisition I had at Christmas was an overlocker machine. My husband bought me a Janome overlocker, which I've yet to get completely out of the box and set up and have a go at using. But I think it's going to be for the first project on there. I'm going to make up William's little t-shirt, because I think that'll work quite nicely on an overlocker. And I think that's all for acquisitions. Right, so last section of the podcast then is my shop update. I have recently reopened my shop, having been on maternity leave for probably about 9 months. I intended to be on maternity leave from the till October, and it's kind of rolled on into January, but I have finally got the shop reopened. If I manage to get this up before Friday, there is a discount code, 9 months already, currently running for 15% off in the shop. But I've uploaded all sorts of recently dyed yarns, like this lovely raspberry. I don't know if the colour's coming out so well there. It's lovely raspberry and cinnamon swirl, and this perfect shade of autumn with all the oranges, yellows and a nice bit of purple. And then this last one here, which is a green and a blue. I don't know if the blue and greens come out very well on this camera. Let's see if it gets better that way around with a bit of light from the window. I don't know how well that's coming out. But as I said, there is a 15% discount code, 9 months already. That runs till this Friday, but keep an eye on the shop because I have got plenty more sections and bits and pieces to add to the shop. I've opened it up with just the yarns and the patterns in for now. My patterns are also available on Ravelry. Right, back again. Since we last spoke, I've taken the little one swimming, and hence the wet hair and showeredness. And I have also found my blue cardigan to show you quickly. So this is my finished item off my whip walk of shame for this month. Right, as I was saying, my patterns are on Ravelry. They're also on Love Knitting, and also in my Etsy shop, which is Tuddin Bryn. On Etsy as well. Okay, and there's a 15% discount code at Tuddin Bryn on Etsy. That is 9 months already. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'll see you again.